At 0341, the first Patriot left the rail. The operator at Al Udeid had been watching his scope fill for 11 minutes. 44 ballistic missiles and 8 drones, inbound from the northeast, stacked across 3 altitude bands. The base housed 10,000 Americans, the forward headquarters of Central Command, and the only combined air operations center controlling coalition strikes across the entire theater. If it went dark, the war lost its brain. He had enough interceptors for maybe half of what was coming. The Pentagon had confirmed the number 5 months earlier, 25% of required stockpiles. Peacetime math. Nobody had planned on 44 in one night. The first 2 PAC-3s climbed on schedule, tracking a medium-range ballistic inbound at 1,400 meters per second. Detonation flashes. Both warheads fired. The missile kept coming. He launched a third. Miss. The impact shook the ground 4 kilometers east of the operations center. Then a second one hit. Then a third. One of them found the radar. The AN/FPS-132 had cost $1.1 billion. It could track a ballistic launch from 5,000 kilometers away, far enough to see a missile leave Iranian soil before the exhaust plume faded. It fed every Patriot battery, every THAAD node, every intercept decision in the Gulf into one picture. And now it was burning. A billion-dollar eye, blind. 16,000 feet above, a pilot in an F-15QA watched the flashes below and understood what they meant before anyone told him. He'd been airborne for 2 hours on combat air patrol, around-the-clock rotation, 2 to 3 hours per sortie, refueling available if an alert extended it to 6 or 8. His jet carried 12 AIM-120 AMRAAMs and an APG-82 radar that could see a fighter-sized target well beyond the horizon. The most advanced Western heavyweight fighter operational anywhere in the world. Not in American inventory, in Qatari. Until 3 minutes ago, he'd been the backup. The second layer behind a layered shield of Patriots and NASAMS batteries and a billion-dollar radar dome that was supposed to make this airspace untouchable. Now, he was the shield. His radar warning receiver was quiet. The missiles had stopped. For now. But the operator on the ground was already on the net, voice flat with the calm that comes after panic passes through and leaves nothing behind. A new track, multiple low-altitude contacts, slow, heading southwest, barely 100 knots. Drones don't need to outrun a Patriot, they just need to fly where it can't look. The drones came in at 60 meters above the Gulf. No radar cross-section worth mentioning, no infrared bloom. Electric motors don't glow. Just a fixed wing doing 110 knots in a straight line, navigating by GPS and a camera that compared coastline to a stored image. The NASAMS batteries were built for exactly this. Medium range, optimized for cruise missiles and low-altitude threats. The second layer that was supposed to catch what Patriot missed. But NASAMS doesn't think for itself. It takes its cue from the radar picture, and the radar picture had just gone dark with a billion-dollar hole in it. Command and control links were scrambled. The batteries were online. The operators were ready. The picture they needed to shoot was gone. The F-15QA pilot caught 2 of them on his APG-82. Faint returns, barely distinguishable from sea clutter at that altitude. He rolled in, got a lock, sent 2 AMRAAMs into the dark. 2 kills, 10 missiles left. But he was a single aircraft covering a country that stretches 160 kilometers north to south, and there were more than 2 drones in the air. The ones he missed split. One turned south toward Mesaid, 40 clicks below Doha. The other kept heading north, toward Ras Laffan. The pilot didn't know what Ras Laffan was. He knew it as a waypoint, a set of coordinates on his display. He didn't know that behind those coordinates sat the largest liquefied natural gas export facility on Earth. That every 5th LNG tanker on the planet loaded there. That 3 of them were berthed and waiting right now, their cryogenic tanks empty, their pumps idle, their crews watching the sky. The southern drone hit first. A water tank at the Mesaid power plant. Industrial damage. Loss of cooling capacity. Nothing catastrophic. The kind of hit that makes the evening news for one cycle and disappears. The northern one didn't miss either. It struck a QatarEnergy facility inside Ras Laffan industrial city. No casualties. Structural damage. Under assessment. But within the hour, QatarEnergy released 6 words that hit harder than any warhead. Production of LNG has been ceased. Force majeure. the legal term for "we've been bombed and contracts no longer apply." The largest LNG exporter on Earth had just gone offline. Dutch gas futures, Europe's benchmark, surged 54% in a single session, the sharpest spike since Russia's tanks crossed into Ukraine. Asian spot prices jumped 39%. 3 tankers sat at berth with nowhere to go. The Strait of Hormuz, through which 80 million tons of LNG and a fifth of the world's oil transits every year, was already a ghost lane. Insurers had pulled coverage, captains had pulled anchors. 2 drones, maybe $100,000 combined, and they had just done what Russia spent 2 years of pipeline politics trying to accomplish. Iran hadn't hit the American base this time. It had hit the one thing Qatar couldn't replace with a phone call to Washington. It had hit the money. If you're watching this and your jaw just dropped, hit subscribe and turn on notifications, because this story has a turn coming that nobody in Doha saw until it was too late. We'll be right back. But the generals in Tehran, celebrating the market chaos, were about to learn something about hitting a country's wallet. When you burn a neutral's money, you burn his neutrality with it. The pilot saw them at 190 clicks. 2 contacts bearing 045, northeast, coming from Iran. They weren't ballistic missiles, too slow, too low, holding formation. They weren't drones, too fast, twin returns, consistent with a swept-wing airframe. Fighter-sized, heading 220, straight for the Qatari coastline. He keyed IFF, no response. He called it in and waited. And that wait, those seconds of silence on the encrypted channel, was the sound of a country deciding what it was. 6 months earlier, Qatar had been the only Gulf state still talking to Tehran. When Iran hit Al Udeid with Fateh 313s in June, Doha condemned it, summoned the ambassador, issued the statements, and then quietly kept the channel open. The Iranian foreign minister flew to Doha 3 months later, sat across from his Qatari counterpart, smiled for the cameras, told journalists that all misunderstandings had been resolved. Both sides knew the math. Beneath the water separating them sat the North Dome South Pars field, 9,700 square kilometers of the largest natural gas reservoir on the planet. One connected geological system. What Qatar pumped on its side affected pressure on Iran's side. 650 million cubic meters a day flowing through Qatari infrastructure, underwriting every skyscraper in Doha, every sovereign wealth investment in London, every diplomatic card the emirate had ever played. You don't go to war with the neighbor who shares your bank vault. That was the logic. For decades, it had worked. Qatar mediated between Washington and Tehran when no one else would, brokered a prisoner exchange that unfroze $6 billion, hosted Taliban negotiations, ran back channel after back channel, Gaza, Afghanistan, the nuclear file. It wasn't neutrality, it was strategy. The smallest country in the Gulf had made itself indispensable to everyone by being dangerous to no one. And 4 weeks ago, as American carriers stacked up in the Arabian Sea, Doha was still working the phones, still pushing de-escalation, still betting that talking was worth more than shooting. Then, Iran hit Ras Laffan. Not the American base, the gas. 170 clicks now. The 2 contacts hadn't deviated. Steady heading, steady altitude. Whatever they were carrying, they intended to deliver it. The pilot had his lock. His APG-82 had been painting them since they crossed the Iranian coastline. 12 missiles in his rails, 10 after the drone intercepts. 2 targets, simple math. But the radio was still silent, because this wasn't a math problem. A Patriot operator fires when the computer says fire. A fighter pilot fires when someone with stars on his shoulder says fire. And right now, somewhere in a room in Doha, men who had spent their careers building bridges were being asked to burn one. 150 clicks. The answer came as a single word on a frequency that didn't officially exist. The pilot turned into the intercept. The Fencers were flying low, 60 meters off the water, wings swept back, terrain following radar painting the surface ahead. It was the one thing the Su-24 still did well: hug the Earth at speeds that would kill a lesser airframe. The design was Soviet, the tactics were Soviet, and the logic was Soviet. Stay below the radar horizon, get close, deliver ordnance, get out. The problem was that the radar horizon had moved. The APG-82 on the F-15QA doesn't care about altitude. It's an active electronically scanned array. 1,600 transmit-receive modules, sweeping the sky faster than any mechanical dish ever built. It had been tracking both fencers since they crossed the Iranian coast. Range, bearing, speed, altitude. The pilot had known their lunch plans before they'd finished breakfast. The fencers didn't know he existed. Their Serena radar warning receivers, a system designed when Vietnam was still front-page news, could detect a fighter radar at maybe 30 kilometers. The F-15QA was painting them from 5 times that distance. In the electromagnetic spectrum, these two aircraft occupied different centuries. 120 clicks. He was transmitting the picture to ground stations through Link 16, the encrypted tactical network that turned every friendly asset into a single organism, one of the few non-NATO countries with access. The data flowed both ways. But right now, there was nothing ground could tell him that his own radar hadn't already said. He selected 2 AIM-120s, one per target. The missile would cover the distance at Mach 4. Fire and forget. Active radar seeker in the nose, no need to hold a lock after launch. The Fencer's countermeasures suite carried chaff dispensers and flares, designed to fool a missile that guided on reflected energy. The AMRAAM generates its own. It doesn't follow a reflection. It hunts. 98 clicks. Inside the no-escape zone. Even if the Fencer pilots saw the launch, even if they broke hard and dumped every decoy they carried, the math no longer worked in their favor. The missile was 3 times faster than they were. Their airframe could pull maybe 6 Gs in a desperate turn. The AMRAAM could pull 40. Fox 3, Fox 3! 2 missiles dropped from the rails, motors ignited, and accelerated past the speed of sound before the pilot finished exhaling. He watched the tracks on his display converge. 8 seconds, 12, 16. 2 contacts became 2 expanding clouds of debris falling toward the Gulf. The Fencer crews never saw it. Their warning receivers stayed silent until the AMRAAMs went active in the terminal phase, maybe 5 seconds before impact. 5 seconds to process a threat they'd never trained against, in an aircraft older than most of the countries in the coalition trying to kill them. They had been sent across the Gulf in a machine designed before Qatar had paved roads, against a jet that cost more than most countries' entire air forces. $333 million of American engineering, flown by a pilot who'd trained at Mountain Home Air Force Base in Idaho, killing a bomber that rolled off a Soviet assembly line when disco was still popular. The F-15's air-to-air record moved to 106-0. The most lopsided scoreboard in the history of aerial combat had just added 2 more lines, and the aircraft that wrote them belonged to a country most people couldn't find on a map. 8 missiles remaining, 6 hours of fuel with a tanker, and a sky that was, for the first time in 3 days, empty. Iran's plan was elegant. Hit the gas, not the base. Udeid had 10,000 Americans, Patriot batteries, concrete shelters. Laffan had pipes and pressure, and a legal clause nobody had tested in wartime. Hit the base, you anger Washington. Hit the gas, you anger everyone. Europe's storage sat below 30%. Germany was at 20%. The heating season wasn't over. Every LNG tanker that didn't load in Laffan was a tanker that wouldn't dock in Rotterdam or Yokohama or Incheon. 2 $50,000 drones had just opened a hole in global energy security that no amount of strategic reserves could plug in under 6 months. Tehran was betting on pain. The logic went like this. If Europe freezes, Europe pressures Washington. If Washington's coalition cracks, the bombing stops. Iran didn't need to win the air war. It needed to make the war expensive enough that someone else ended it. It almost worked. But the strategists who picked Laffan missed something. They understood the economics. They understood the politics. They didn't understand what happens to a neutral when you hit his money. For 30 years, Qatar had made itself the indispensable middleman. Small enough to threaten no one, rich enough to matter to everyone. It brokered prisoner swaps between Washington and Tehran, hosted the Taliban talks that ended the Afghan war, ran the back channels on the nuclear file that kept diplomats employed across 3 continents. A country with fewer people than Houston had turned geography and gas into a seat at every table that mattered. Iran had been part of that equation, not an ally, a partner in the only asset that mattered more than diplomacy. The gas field beneath the Gulf connected them at the molecular level. 1 reservoir, 1 pressure system. Qatar's North Dome and Iran's South Pars, separated by a line on a map, joined by geology that doesn't read maps. What one side pumps affects what the other side gets. Iran's section was already in decline. 75% of its domestic gas came from South Pars, and output was falling without $40 billion in upgrades Tehran couldn't afford. Qatar had every reason to keep the peace, and Iran burned that reason to the ground with a drone that cost less than a mid-sized sedan. The joint statement came that evening. 7 countries, the US, Qatar, Saudi Arabia, Bahrain, Kuwait, Jordan, the UAE, condemned the attacks in language that left no room for back channels. Qatar's foreign ministry spokesperson told CNN the country could not allow such attacks to go unanswered. The word mediator didn't appear. Somewhere over the Gulf, a pilot with 8 missiles and a full tank of gas was flying a $333 million aircraft in slow circles over a country that had just rewritten its foreign policy in the time it takes to say Fox 3. Below him, Ras Laffan sat dark. 3 tankers at berth, going nowhere. Across the water, on the Iranian side of the same gas field, the wells that supplied 75% of a nation's energy kept pumping into a war that their own government had just made worse. Iran had created its own enemy. Every missile that hit Qatari soil had been one step closer to this moment, the moment the one country still willing to pick up Tehran's phone calls decided to stop answering. If you were that pilot, circling above a burning neutrality at 16,000 feet with a radar full of nothing and a country full of questions, drop it in the comments. Tell us where you're watching from. And if this story hit different, like, subscribe, hit the bell. This is War Horizon. See you on the next one.